I found a string of cultured pearls yesterday that I'm going to try and get for you. I'll not tell you the price, for you'd think I was crazy. That sentence was written 80 years ago by my paternal grandfather, Woodrow Bonner, in a barracks in occupied Japan to my paternal grandmother, Vera Harper Bonner, in Alabama. It started an 8-week hunt that he could not finish, and a story I knew vaguely until I sat down with 548 of their letters that were written between them over 18 months from World War II. That is this story. This is the first episode of a series that I will do on a book that I wrote called Loose Pearls, a memoir built from those 548 letters in World War II between my grandparents, writing to each other in 1945 and 1946. Over several episodes, I'm going to tell you stories from the book, and I'm going to show you how I built it so that you can do the same thing with your own family letters or written artifacts if you have them. Today's story is a chapter where the book got its name. My grandfather was 33 years old when the Army called him in March of 1945, and that's old for a draftee. He was married with 2 small boys at home. Cecil, my father, was 8 years old, and Errol, my uncle, was 3. He had a farm and had worked in sawmilling in rural Pickens County, Alabama. He had never been a soldier in his life and barely ever left West Alabama. By February of 1946, he had been in the Army for almost a year, and he had been in Japan for 6 months. He was in the Quartermaster Corps, working on boilers, handling supplies, all the unglamorous work of an occupation, and he was stationed in Kobe, Japan. My grandmother was 32. She was raising the boys alone in a small West Alabama town called Reform. They wrote each other almost every day. They had been married since July the 4th, 1936. They had been apart since March 21st, 1945, and they would not see each other again until September of 1946, 18 months. And in the middle of that long absence, my grandfather was pearl hunting. On February the 6th, 1946, he was somewhere in Kobe in one of the small shops that had been reopened after the firebombing, or in a dealer's back room, and he found a string of pearls, cultured pearls. He sits down that day and he writes my grandmother, "I found a string of cultured pearls yesterday that I'm going to try and get for you. I'll not tell you the price, for you'd think I was crazy." He won't tell her the price. It was probably a week of his pay or more. Pearl prices in occupied Japan were erratic in early 1946. The pre-war Mikomoto operation was just resuming. The yen was collapsing against the dollar. American soldiers were a primary buyer market. My grandfather wasn't a hugely wealthy man. He didn't tell her what it cost because he knew what she would probably say. The next day, on February the 7th, he writes again, "I'm sorry to tell you that I didn't get the pearls. We'll try to get them later, but I can't promise you." 24 hours later, found and lost. That's when the hunt began, 8 weeks of hunting. On February the 18th, 12 days later, he was hunting again. "If I can find a nice string," he writes. In the same letter, he tells her he has 300 American dollars and 45,000 Japanese yen in his pocket. The yen was nearly worthless, and he couldn't send it home, but it would buy pearls in Kobe. He was assembling resources, and he was still looking. On March the 10th, 1946, he packed a wooden crate in the Kobe barracks. He addresses it to my grandmother. Inside the crate was a Japanese rifle, a sword, a saber, a tablecloth, napkins, handkerchiefs, an ivory carving of a pig, and 3 cultured pearls. Not a string, but 3 loose pearls. He sends the crate east across the Pacific. On March 20th, Vera, my grandmother, writes back. She has read his letter about the find, and she writes him this: I will be happy to receive a string of pearls from your sweet hands. If you can't find any over there suitable, just save your money till you get home. I'm pretty sure you can get them here. She gave him permission and permission to fail in the same sentence, and let him decide which one he needed. He kept hunting. On March 31st, he writes that the Japanese government has clamped down on precious stones and jewelry exports, restricting exports to control currency and the black market. My grandfather experienced it as a wall between him and the gift he was trying to make for 8 weeks. On April the 2nd, 2 days later, he's still, and I'm quoting, eyeing a string of pearls if he can get the money. And then, after April, the thread goes quiet. He stops writing about it. She stops asking. Now, 2 months earlier, on March 10th, my grandfather had packed that wooden crate. It traveled across the Pacific. It traveled through the Army's post-war mail system. And on a Tuesday in May of 1946, my grandmother opened it in her kitchen in Reform, Alabama. By that point, she had raised the boys alone for over a year. She had burned off kudzu. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a growing vine. It was actually from Japan, and it will just take over your yard if you don't keep cutting it. She had paid the bills. She had sat up with sick children. She had survived a winter. She had watched her small town absorb the end of a war and the beginning of whatever the next thing was going to be called. And on a Tuesday in May, she opened the wooden crate from Japan, and she wrote my grandfather back. I got a precious letter from you yesterday, and the wooden crate of guns, swords. The pearls are real pretty. Tablecloth, napkins, and handkerchiefs too, and I love the little ivory carved pig. It was like Christmas again, getting into the box and exploring every corner. 3 pearls, real pretty, like Christmas again. The gift was incomplete. She received it as if it were whole. And here's where I have to be honest with you, because the book is honest about this too. After April of 1946, the pearl thread gets quiet. It goes away. My grandmother had those 3 loose pearls until she died in 2004. I had just never heard all of the story or more of the story until my Uncle Errol gave me these letters in 2016. The hunt was real, and for at least 8 weeks in the winter and spring of 1946, my grandfather spent his free time in Kobe trying to buy his wife a string of pearls. He was not completely successful. He was not, by the correspondence's record, ever fully successful in the way that he wanted to be. But he kept at it. The book is called Loose Pearls. It's not named for a finished string. It is named for 3 loose pearls in a wooden crate. It's named for the pearls he could buy, the string he couldn't, the wanting, the 8 weeks of trying, the permission she gave him to fail, the refusal in him that wouldn't let him. That is the whole marriage in a miniature. That's why the book takes its title from its story. He was going to try and get it. He didn't tell her the price, and she had the loose pearls until she passed. That's how the story ends. That's the story the book takes its name from. There are 32 more chapters. The day my grandfather shipped to the Pacific, the letters he burned in a Kobe stove, the radio announcement that made him jump over 6 beds in the barracks, the homecoming I deliberately can't write about because no one wrote it down. Loose Pearls is on Amazon. The link is in the description. And in the next episode, I'm going to show you how I actually built this book. The 3-folder system I used to sort 548 letters. The master log I kept in Excel. And the rule that kept me from drowning. If you have your own family's letters in a box somewhere, that episode is the one to build a strategy on your own book. Subscribe so it shows up. Thank you for being here.